The Laetrile case is another classic business ethics case, this one from the pharmaceutical industry. Before we plunge into the arguments for and against Laetrile, it's worth highlighting the way in which pharmaceutical cases add a few extra wrinkles to standard business ethics cases. One way in which it does so is that pharmaceuticals is a very high-tech industry. That is to say, there's an enormous amount of scientific knowledge and technical knowledge that the case can turn on. Pharmaceuticals in the 20th century and now coming into the 21st century have been enormously high-tech, that is to say, involving cutting-edge scientific and engineering research. The other way in which pharmaceuticals are or add a different wrinkle to business ethics case is that it's a highly innovative field. As I say, every decade brings new pharmaceuticals and in many cases new approaches to pharmaceuticals. And what this means is that we are constantly in the case of making decisions about brand new pharmaceuticals, pharmaceuticals that have had some testing, certainly in the labs and in trials and so forth, but their long-term effects are not necessarily known. And so what this implies, both of these criteria for business ethics cases, is that we, as people who don't necessarily have medical degrees, right, or PhDs in physiology and so forth, are nonetheless required or urged to make decisions, moral decisions about things that we do not have the technical expertise to make judgments on. And also the issue of innovativeness means that we are constantly making decisions when not all of the data is in, right? There might be promising signs one way or the other, but we're making judgments, right, with a high degree of uncertainty about the long-term effects of these things. Now, in the case of Laetrile was an apricot extract, or that was one common source of it, and it was thought to be a possible cure for cancer or possibly to prevent cancer or to alleviate some of the symptoms of cancer. And there's a significant amount of testing that had been done on it over the decades. It had its advocates and its detractors. But what occurred in the early 1970s was that the FDA made a judgment against Laetrile and decided to ban it from the marketplace. This prompted some outcries from Laetrile's advocates, including some cancer patients who wanted to have it available to them, arguing that the FDA was taking away an option that should be available to cancer patients. So the first thing I want to do is highlight some of the claims that were made on behalf of Laetrile and against Laetrile, and putting in a framing discussion schema that will enable us to take us to the next stage of the argument. On the one side, the claims that were made by Laetrile and its advocates is that it is a possible cure for cancer. I'm using this diamond symbol. That's a logic symbol, just means possible or possibility, something in that area. So it's a possible cure, right, or it's a positive palliative, right, or it's a possible preventive for cancer. There's some data, and the data was not very strong, right, in favor of this, but still there's a possibility, and they wanted to have that possibility acknowledged. There are also some economic claims that the course of Laetrile was a whole lot less expensive than other forms of treating cancer, which involved a great deal of money, that Laetrile had fewer side effects compared to other kinds of treatments. Chemotherapy and radiation courses involve certain amounts of exposure to radiation, and that can cause people's hair to fall out, make them feel nauseous, and so forth. So the claim was that the side effects with respect to the use of Laetrile were a great deal. And there also was the argument with respect to the psychological effects, that it could possibly have a placebo effect. Complicated mind-body interactions occur in pharmaceuticals. So even if there are no physiological benefits to the use of Laetrile, if people take Laetrile and believe that it might be doing something for them, they're going to be in a stronger psychological framework, and that will help them deal with their medical situations as well. And the other argument was that even if there's nothing to any of those things, at least having Laetrile available would give people hope, right? Rather than physicians saying, sorry, to some cancer patients, there's just nothing that we can do for you. Laetrile is at least an option, and people are then more hopeful and thinking positively in that case. Now, the other side of the argument plays up the negatives, right, or the costs, right, associated with respect to Laetrile. And here the argument was that there is no evidence, right, or no significant evidence that Laetrile works, right, positively, either as a palliative or as a preventive or as a cure. And so that side then will argue that yes, it might cost less money, but nonetheless, if it doesn't work, then it's a matter of wasting money. This side will also play up the point that there are various opportunity costs. If Laetrile is available, then some patients might choose not to avail themselves of certain cancer treatments that might be more effective in dealing with cancer symptoms, and so they will miss out on the opportunity to take advantage of those benefits there. And they will also argue that, yeah, sure, it's there might be a hope that we're giving to people, but it is a false hope. And we shouldn't delude people with pie in the sky or things that have no basis for it as well. And there was also some evidence that in some people that there were side effects. There were some possible toxicities depending on the quantity of Laetrile that was ingested and the unique physiology, right, of the individual. So what we then had on mostly then scientific and economic grounds and some medical psychological grounds, some arguments about the benefits and costs, so to speak. Now I want to take up this this issue in which this high-techness and innovativeness, right, of this pharmaceutical industry case gives us a challenge in trying to formulate exactly what the business ethics issue. We are not medical experts, right, in this case. We don't have the physiologies and so forth, so it's not really appropriate from the business ethics perspective for us to be making judgment calls about whether or not the evidence is pro or con. Right? That's not my position as a business ethics person. I may have expertise in that field, but I have no expertise to make judgments in these particular areas here. That is something for the physiologists to figure out, for the medical doctors and so forth and figure out. Now I can take their opinions and their judgments into account, but it's not appropriate for me to offer myself up as a medical expert and say, on the basis of this medical claim, I make a certain judgment with respect to business ethics. And there are certainly economic issues here, and as business ethicists, we may have greater expertise with respect to doing economic calculations and so forth, but nonetheless, we are not economists, and we shouldn't be making judgments that turn upon economic expertise. Right, nor are we medical psychologists, and so we shouldn't be making judgments that turn on medical psychology. Nonetheless, all of this data is relevant to making a good decision, and business ethics should be about making good decisions. So the question here is, how do we take all of this into account? Recognizing that we have a possibly innovative drug here, but there's a great deal of scientific uncertainty about it, and that it's very high tech and that we don't have the technical expertise to make those judgments. How do we take nonetheless all of that into account and make a business ethics judgment, right, one way or the other? So what I would propose is to say that what we have is, as a next step, right, a journalistic point, which is to say that people on either side of the case are making claims about the benefits and claims about the costs, that whether one is in favor of Laetriles being available or not, one should be able to recognize that all of these are legitimate points that should be taken into account. And so journalistically, when we're doing our initial investigation, we recognize, yeah, there are all of these possible benefits. Yes, there are all of these possible costs. But from our purposes, what we need to do is to plunge into the controversy by recognizing that the two sides are making not only claims about benefits and claims about costs, but about relative benefits and costs. And so what we have is some people believe, right, or they make the judgment that the benefits to Laetrile are greater than the costs of benefits. So they will say, yeah, maybe the evidence is not strong, maybe we'll be wasting our money, maybe there are opportunity costs, maybe this is false hope, maybe there are risks of toxicity, but all of that, whatever judgment we put about cumulative costs together is less than my judgment of the perceived value of the potential for a cure, the potential for saving money, the potential for having to endure fewer side effects, placebo effect as a positive, and the hope that it gives people as well. And then on the other side of the argument, we have people who have made the opposite judgment. We have people, right, who believe that the costs, right, of Laetrile are greater than the benefits. And so what we have here are two judgments, two value judgments that are benefit-cost judgments. And that is certainly closer to business ethics decision-making. Right? How do we weigh benefits and costs and make then the right decision by taking those things into account? Now, we have it abstractly put, some people are on each side of the case here, and this is where we should identify formally the parties in this case. There were many people who had opinions right on this, but the ones I want to single out are the cancer patients. There's a significant number of cancer patients. Obviously, they are, in this case, going to be the consumers. They're the ones who are considering or want to be able to consider whether to purchase Laetrile or not. There are the manufacturers of the Laetrile. This is the business side of the equation. And they want to be able to produce Laetrile and sell it on the market. We have, in this case, a branch of the government. It's in the United States context, a federal branch of the government, the Food and Drug Administration. It has made a judgment that Laetrile, in their estimation, should not be made legal. And I want to make a case that these are the primary parties that are involved because these are the ones who are making claims with respect to being decision makers in the case. There are any number of other parties who are involved. There were organizations like the American Medical Association that made pronouncements about various of the medical issues here. There were various researchers who had studied Laetrile, and they made their own judgments and so forth. Family members who, in many cases, are part of the considerations, helping the cancer patient, advising the cancer patient, and so forth. So they can certainly be a part of the overall case. There are also physicians who will be the ones, if Laetrile is available, to decide whether to prescribe or not Laetrile in individual cases. And there are various advocacy groups as well who are on various sides. Sometimes they're cancer patient advocates, or sometimes they're advocates for various professional organizations and so on, and they would weigh in with their opinions as well. Now, these ones here in the brackets that I put down below, I want to set them aside and argue that in this business ethics case, these are the primary three parties who are affected because they are the ones who are candidates for a primary decision maker role. All of these other parties may be involved in the case, but they are at best in advisory roles. Right? The American Medical Association does not make political decisions, and it doesn't make decisions for cancer patients. Instead, its job is to make recommendations about matters medical from a professional perspective. Researchers, again, aren't going to be making the decisions. Instead, what they will do is publish the results of their research. Family members are more intimately involved with the patients, but again, family members don't make the decision for the patient, unless the patient is a minor or incapacitated. But if we suppose a standard adult competent decision maker, then family members, again, are advisory, and the same holds for physicians. Physicians give advice and may decide not to do various various things, but if something is going to be done, it has to be with the patient's consent, and that means the patient is the decision maker. And advocacy groups are, again, just making arguments that they hope that the primary decision makers will take into account. So the question here is going to be, if these are our three primary parties who are involved in the case, where do they array themselves when we go up to the some people issue up here? Can we put that in more concrete relief? Typically, with respect to this side of the argument, we have cancer patients, not all of them, but a significant number of them, who are arguing that the benefits of Laetrile are greater than the costs, and so they want to be able to take cancer patient, or take the Laetrile rather. And we also have the Laetrile manufacturer, or manufacturers, who believe that the benefits of Laetrile are greater than the costs, and so they want to be able to make it available, or make it legal for them to produce it. And then against them, what we have is the FDA, which has made its judgment that the costs involved with respect to Laetrile are greater than the benefits, and so it wants to ban it. Now, our question then, and this is going to be a question that is a business ethics question, right, is when we have a conflict of beliefs here, or a conflict of opinions about proper cost-benefit judgments and calls, whose decision should prevail, right? And when we put it in that way, we are using explicitly ethics language. So if we say whose belief, right, or whose decision should it be, right? So whose belief, right, should prevail, right? Or who, right, ought to make the decision. And here we're using the ethics language, right? Should and ought. And that then is to say that the business ethics portion of the case is not about the medical issues and the technical issues per se, but it is about responsibility for making decisions. And that is our issue here. And what we have then is an argument that the cancer patients and the Laetrile manufacturers are making is, yeah, this is our opinion here, and it should be our decision to make. And the FDA is arguing, well, we disagree with your opinion, but the more important business ethics, in this case political ethics issue, is we believe it should be our decision to make, right, as the governmental body. And so that, I think, frames the issue and highlights, right, what are the ethics and the political ethics elements of this particular business ethics case. So that means we have to take into account that there are lots of medical issues, technical issues, and so forth on the table, but we are not to plunge into and try to weigh the evidence for and against on that. Instead, we step back and say, here we have individuals, right, in society who want to relate to each other in various ways, who are asserting certain powers, certain responsibilities, certain decision rights, and so forth. What can we, right, as business ethicists say about the proper resolution of that dispute over decision-making power and responsibility?